So we have former Catholics that sometimes will show up and they'll like come to me and they're like, I have a confession. And I'm like, I'm not that kind of priest, like they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, that's not how we do it around here. You just go right to God with it. But
You're like, just take it to
I'm
God.
happy to like lay hands and pray. Yeah. You got it.
It's Emilie. It's Ashlie. They're talking church. That's church. Yeah.
Hey, welcome to That's Church. My sister Emmy and I are on a mission to open our hearts and minds by attending different churches here in Utah. We're talking to the beautiful people that make their church a community. We believe that gaining knowledge of other religions does not diminish our own faith, but can instead add to it.
Jason, we are so happy to have you on our podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
So excited.
It took a minute because you were going to Israel when we first asked you, which is very interesting timing. And so it took a minute to connect again. But and we want to hear a little bit more about that toward the end of the podcast. And for our listeners, at the time of recording this, Israel was just attacked this weekend. So kind of a crazy time to be doing this, and so sad. And actually, we are supposed to go to Israel next spring, and that may not happen either. Jason and his wife, Candice, created their own church called the Courageous Church in Sugar House. And we attended that church a couple times. We had a great time. Jason's son and my son play football together, so which has been so much fun to get to know them. We've actually known each other for a few years, right?
Yeah,
they've played together.
Seasons.
Yeah, and it's been like one big happy family. It's a really close team, and we've been really happy. To start us off, just give us kind of an overview of your church. Tell us a little bit about the history of it, the community you serve.
Yeah. So my wife Candice and I moved to Northern Utah in July of 2018, and we started Courageous Church on September 15th, 2019. And actually, we started meeting in a theater called the Cottonwood Megaplex Theater in Holiday. And basically, we're there for about 5 months after launch until COVID erupted. And then, of course, as you know, and as everybody now knows, it kind of changed everything. The world pivoted and we were forced to pivot. And we started doing outdoor services in Holiday. We started doing outdoor services in Sandy. It got really cold, started to snow. We figured it'd probably be a good idea to come indoors. So then we moved to South Jordan. And we shared a space with a Spanish-speaking congregation there for about 18 months. We were doing night services until last year. We moved back to Salt Lake. We moved downtown. We're in the Sugar House area right off Foothill. And we've been there for a little bit over a year now, which is pretty cool. And I would say that as a church, we primarily serve people that are interested in having what we would call like a very real and vibrant relationship with God, and that are big on God, but maybe not so big on institutional religion. And so we have a lot of people that come to us from all different kind of spiritual backgrounds. Some of them are former LDS, some are former Catholic, some are former Baptist, you name it, we got it. So
I love that. I think we met a couple of your members that had come from the Catholic Church. So, and they were lovely. They were absolutely lovely.
The people we met at your church were so kind, and just so warm. Like they were just so genuine and so sweet. So yeah. Can I just say too, I love so much that you guys worshiped outdoors during COVID. That like sounds so magical.
Yeah.
I love that. One of my favorite things when I was younger
you made
was that
it work.
Yes, you can make it work. Yeah. I loved when I was younger when we'd have class outside. We only did that a couple times, but I loved that. I remember that as a kid.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
Recess is the best. And we just had about a year of recess outdoors.
Yes.
It was
recess.
It was actually a lot of fun. People kind of rallied and brought their lawn chairs. We did cookouts and barbecues. And actually, as a young church, like a new church, it was actually a great time of relationship building and community building. And we really got to know people, which was awesome. It was just obviously a difficult time to do that. But the silver lining was that we got to draw really close to one another, which was really cool.
I feel like people during COVID needed community and spirituality probably more than ever. So that's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think some people just didn't have anything. So I love that you made it happen.
Yes, yes. The next question, which you kind of explained already a little bit for people who might not know, and this was not me. Okay, it was me. But what does non-denominational actually mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually get asked that quite a lot as a non-denominational church. Yeah,
oh, good.
People
it's
ask
not just me
all
then.
the time. No, you'd be surprised how many people want to know what that means. We get calls and emails all the time. So I would say to that answer, or to that question, my answer would be that a non-denominational church is primarily a church that doesn't have an institutional, or you could even say a more formal governing body over it. So, for example, we would be considered an independent church. So we're not necessarily tied to any one particular denomination. Now, that said, my wife Candice and I have both worked with people from lots of different denominational backgrounds, from lots of different spiritual backgrounds. We have a lot of experience working with people from within the denominational church. We just kind of felt like it wasn't for us. It didn't resonate with us in the kind of faith community that we wanted to both start and foster. But we also see a lot of value in a lot of what some of those denominations bring to the table. And so the way we look at it as a non-denominational church is that we are one of many streams of the Christian faith that get to express their life in Christ uniquely, but also in a way that's not like burdened with institutionalism and with like over governance, and in ways that I think actually really help people that are hungry for God really experience more of God. And that was really a big part of how I was raised, to actually spiritually hunger for more of God, not less of God. And so in our experience with denominationalism is that sometimes it can limit that hunger, or it can stifle people that are actually looking for something more. And so we wanted to kind of steer clear of that and operate in a way in which we could still have relationships with other churches, have relationships with other networks and other affiliations, but not necessarily be governed by them, if that makes sense.
I love that. So you teach from the Bible directly. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. We love the Bible, what I would refer to as the scriptures. We absolutely are Bible believing, Bible based Christians. We love the scriptures. We love what they represent, what they give us. We would even say that they are God's word, or that we would affirm the scriptures as being inspired by and God breathed.
Oh, I love that. And is there a specific translation that you use?
So when I was a kid, I kind of grew up with the King James and the New King James, but in recent years, I've moved to the English Standard Version, which is a kind of a very literal word for word translation. What the translators basically did was they went back to the original Greek and Hebrew manuscripts and translated it directly from the original manuscripts, which is really cool. And that's awesome. It gives you a very literal reading, but it's also a very like easy to read version, which is helpful for me. And I found it to be really helpful for people that like can't read the King James, that don't understand the prose of like thou and thus. Right. And, it's a less complicated version to read, and I think easier for people to understand.
Oh, that's great. I noticed awesome. That at your church that they were giving free Bibles, and I said, well, I have one, but I want one of those.
Yeah.
I love the easy
Yeah, we definitely each took one.
And in the LDS church, actually, we just, the leaders actually just affirmed that they recognize other translations, and that they kind of maybe gave permission to use other translations to learn from and teach from. And I think actually they say not to teach from it in a formal setting, but to learn from it on your own individually, something like that. So
that's cool.
I've always been really intrigued by different versions. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I love the ESV a lot. I also really like the NLT, which stands for New Living Translation. And it's not a word for word translation, but it helps you really understand like the concept of the verse or the phrase itself. So it's what would be considered a dynamic translation or a dynamic equivalent translation. So the idea is that it's still communicating the message of God for now, but in a way that you can understand, that's less formal and less literal. And so I use that translation quite a bit, sometimes just to share thoughts or ideas. But when we're reading through or when we're teaching through a particular book in the Bible, we usually lean on the ESV pretty heavily.
Okay. That's great.
For me, coming from a religion where where women, not some women, just women in general, are not allowed to hold certain callings, such as bishop or stake president, it was so refreshing to see that Candice is also a pastor at your church. If you could you share a little bit about like maybe how your styles as pastor differ or different roles that you guys take on?
Yeah, happy to. So first and foremost, like we understand that this is a very controversial issue within the church, and like denominations disagree on this and definitely fight and divide over it. So I understand first and foremost that it can be like a really tricky thing. But what we've kind of committed to do, which is actually view ministry the same way we view our marriage, and that is as a partnership. So we believe that ministry as partnership enables us to actually do life together in a way that's very fulfilling and empowering to both the gifts and the callings that are on our life. So obviously, before I ever met my wife, Candice, I felt called to ministry. Before Candice ever met me, she felt called to ministry. And so in bringing our two lives together, we felt like ministry need to happen in a way that could empower both of us to continue in those callings and giftings that we'd received apart from one another. So that's the first thing I would say. Partnership is a big thing that kind of governs the way that we view our ministry together, which is obviously both fun, but also challenging because we're different people, right? Like she's very different than me. I'm very different than her. Like we see the world through very different lenses oftentimes.
Sure.
But because of that reason, because we're so different, it also complements the areas in our lives that benefit from where she's perhaps gifted in a different way than I am, or where she's perhaps equipped or has giftings or strengths that I don't have, and vice versa. So because of that reason, we try to operate within this paradigm I like to call lanes. So if you think of like two people running a race, like a marathon race together, and they're both running in the same direction, but they're operating in different lanes. She has her lane, I have my lane. We're both running the same race. We're both running it together, but we're running in different lanes. And so as a result, like what that means is that I provide her space to run in her lane in a way that best suits her, and she provides me space to run in a lane that best suits me. So as our executive pastor, Candice has the responsibilities of administrating and pastoring our weekend ministry, our teams. She runs our departments. She oversees our communications. She also teaches and preaches as well. She does a lot. She wears a lot of different hats. Well, myself, I also wear a lot of different hats, but as the lead pastor, I'm also able to operate in a way that's a little distinct and different from that, in that I'm able to still work alongside of her to bring vision to people, to lead people, to teach, to communicate, to oversee ministry that happens throughout the week with people, to shepherd, provide care, and so forth. So as pastors, which really for us, the word pastor means shepherd. And so as people that kind of see our primary role as shepherding people, just like as a parent, you would shepherd the heart of your child, we get to shepherd hearts. We get to care for people. We get to nurture people. We get to hopefully inspire people. And in that, we get to do it uniquely, but together. And so that's kind of the paradigm that I think we operate from. It works for us. We see evidence of it within the scriptures, within the book of Acts. Ministry couples very early on in the life of the church were doing ministry together, and the church was exploding. It was flourishing, and it was doing so at a time where there was a lot of persecution, and it was really challenging. So we just see that as an invitation for us to be able to kind of follow and do the same thing.
That is so beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I'm going to need those chapters. I'm gonna need those chapters from Acts because that sounds amazing. And can I just say #couple goals, because you guys are awesome. I met your wife. She is so sweet. She is amazing. And I could tell that you guys both take different roles. And it's just so impressive to me because, like you said, like just in marriage, like my husband has qualities that I don't have, and you each bring something to the table. I love that so much.
And you were definitely very inspiring in both of the services that we attended. And I'm curious, I wasn't able to see the capacity that Candice teaches in. You mentioned that she teaches a little bit. What capacity does she teach in, and how does that happen?
Yeah, so she will, from time to time and occasionally preach and teach on a Sunday morning within our adult services. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see messages that she's actually delivered and given, which are awesome. And on top of that, she obviously gets to help us lead our ministry teams. And so she teaches within the context of our team gatherings. Sometimes we have team nights or we have meetups with our actual like leaders and people that are part of our team. She gets to teach and help be a part of that process. And then stuff that we've done like through the years together at like conferences or at ministry events. Oftentimes she gets to kind of flex some teaching muscle there as well, which is cool.
Oh, that's awesome. I would love to hear that sometime. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you guys had a taco meetup, and I was really bummed to miss that.
I know.
It was a good one. And it was free. I did not realize it was free tacos.
Emmy and Todd really rubbed that one in.
And
they didn't even bring me one.
They were extra good too.
I'll tell you what, Ashlie, we will do taco day again and we'll make sure that you're there.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Yes. Never wanted to go and worship more. That's amazing. My husband would be very excited as well. So Jason, within your ministry, do you have any stories or experiences from your time as a pastor that maybe left a lasting impact on you?
Gosh, I mean, there's so
many, I'm sure.
Many. It's hard to choose one, right? I think for me, pastoring is an interesting journey in that you get to walk with people through both their highs and their lows. So you get to experience tremendous highs, right? Like weddings, celebrations, moments of birth. You get to see lives changed. Obviously, you get to see like a tremendous amount of positive things happen in their life. But then you also like walk through really difficult and dark valleys. You bury people. You perform funerals. You walk with people through some of their lowest moments in life. And probably some of the most impactful moments have come during those times where you get to kind of hold the hands of people that are walking through the loss of a loved one. I'll never forget, we had a guy that was on our worship team, a big, wonderful Black African-American man, had an amazing voice, and he died of a heart attack. And I'll never forget showing up at the hospital and walking into the room and seeing him there lifeless, and then having his 10-year-old daughter come in and experience the loss of her dad in that moment. That probably has impacted me and stayed with me more than any moment in ministry. And then on the flip side of that, you get to see God like do these wonderful, incredible, restorative things in people's lives. You see like former criminals who had like this rough life or who were former addicts discover like a new life in Jesus and become some of the most loving, beautiful people on the planet. So you get to also see people transform and find freedom from addiction and experience healing. And of course, we've seen like God do a lot of amazing things in that way, both like supernaturally that I can't explain, but that I've witnessed and seen. And then also like naturally through the process of time, just through like the transformation that happens and that comes like in our daily lives. So for me, I would say it's all of those things. It's the highs and the lows and watching God kind of work in the midst of them.
Wow, that's amazing. I served a mission for the LDS Church when I was a young person, and I one of the most impactful moments there was helping somebody die. And it was an elderly person, and they didn't have family, and they specifically requested the missionaries to come and just be with them while they passed away. And it was actually, I was really nervous about it, but it was actually one of the most beautiful moments of my entire life. It was just, and we just kind of held their hand as they passed, and they just wanted someone there. So I'm sure I'm sure that is an amazing part of your calling.
Yeah, we
so
call it the
beautiful.
ministry of presence. It's this
Oh.
idea of being present to people in a way that obviously meets their need, and it's not always very dramatic and exciting. Of course, I could talk about a lot of dramatic and exciting things that I've seen and witnessed in ministry, but those moments, the moments where you get to really lean into that ministry of presence for people, I think is beautiful, and it's wonderful, and it's unique, and it makes what we do very real. And obviously it changes your life, like it's changed my life just being able to be a part of those kind of things.
Oh, for sure.
I'm sure that is so
I
beautiful.
hate to detour from this because it's such a beautiful topic, and you said everything so beautifully. But what are your core beliefs, like within your church? What are your core beliefs, your practices, rituals?
So we always start with what I call as like our primary and big core belief, which is that Jesus is the only hope for humanity. And I love this belief because it really shapes and governs everything that we do. We believe, obviously, in the person of Jesus from Nazareth, that he lived, that he died, that he rose again. We believe that he commissioned his followers, his church, to go and then make disciples of all nations, to baptize them, teach them all that he's commanded them to do. And then, of course, we believe that we get to be a part of that, which is really cool, that we get to say yes to his calling to do that. So that's kind of our core belief that governs everything that we do. In terms of kind of practices and values, we really value community. We believe that the church should look more like family and less like a corporation. So we really want people to become known and to be really well loved. We value generosity. We value a life that gives more than it takes, a life where we get to be kind of lavish and bold with our giving. On top of that, I would say that we obviously value God's word, what we call the Holy Scriptures. We believe that like his word is truth for our life. We want to be truth-formed people, but we also equally value the work of the Spirit. We love experiencing his presence and having a sense that God's actually like working in us and through us and among us through the person of the Holy Spirit. I would also say we value prayer. So we are a very prayerful people. Like kind of the mantra at our church is we are passionate about prayer. We love to pray. We believe that like prayer is powerful. And then of course we value a life that's devoted to Jesus. So for us, like everything kind of hinges on who Jesus is, and then the invitation that he extends for us to experience his life here and now. And so that's, I would say, like in a nutshell, kind of our core beliefs, our practices, our values as a church.
I love that. I noticed
that is so beautiful.
I noticed that during this service, as we've attended a lot of different churches throughout the valley, most of them have like some sort of sacrament. Most of the Christian churches, even some like Hindu, they have some type of ritual that's similar to that. Is that something you practice or believe in? Or I know we talked to a couple of the members in your congregation about baptism, and they told us a little bit about your belief there. So I just wonder where you stand with sacrament.
Yeah, it's a great question. The idea of sacrament, the way that I've always understood it, because I know that those words, and particularly that word, can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Like you talk to a Catholic about sacrament, they're going to look at that in a much more like liturgical or formal way. I would say that our two kind of primary sacraments would be obviously baptism, which you just mentioned, like water baptism, and communion. The taking of the bread and the wine as a means of remembering like what Jesus did for us. So as a non-denominational church, that's probably about as sacramental as we get. But we certainly like believe that like worship is a sacrament. We believe that like when we're singing together corporately in worship, or even prayer, we believe that prayer can happen sacramentally. We wouldn't probably put as much of a formal liturgical description on that as maybe some people would or some denominations would, but we certainly still see it as like a means of like an external grace. I think that's kind of the idea of sacrament, is that it's like an external sign of an inward working grace. So for us, like these are symbols. They don't hold value in and of themselves. Like I would differ from my Catholic brother or sister in that they would actually see the body as being the actual body of Christ, like in some kind of transubstantiated way or some kind of like metaphysical way. I see it as being a symbol that's kind of pointing to the reality of Jesus's body or the reality of Jesus's blood. And so like water baptism is the same way for us. It's a symbol. It's kind of a physical sign of like an inward grace or a spiritual reality that perhaps is happening all around us or in a way that we don't understand. And that's still very real. So the symbol itself can point to something that's real, but the symbol itself doesn't have necessarily its own particular value as like a spiritual thing or as like a like an item that has power in it. That would be our belief, is that it's pointing us to the person of Jesus, or it's pointing us to a spiritual reality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I feel like during COVID, so many people in our religion struggled with not being able to take sacrament physically. And I kind of felt the opposite, because I noticed that by not taking it physically every week and like having that time to think of Jesus, that we have every Sunday, I was actually doing it more often. I was actually like, because it wasn't there, I almost was like trying to find Jesus in other places besides sacrament. Whereas when we were younger, our mom would always say, like, we have to get to church on time to take sacrament. Like that was the important part of our worship, was getting sacrament. And if we were late and we missed it, she would be bummed, even though we still had the rest of church and not just that sacrament. But for some reason, that was set apart in her mind as like the most important part. Whereas I took more comfort from, like I said, like worshiping outdoors, even when I, was young, or prayer. I love that you mentioned prayer being such a powerful part of your religion, because that was something that my mom passed on to me. Speaking of things from mom, that I watched my mom pray in her bed on her knees every night. And sometimes she would fall asleep and I'd have to like go wake her. but I do that.
I've done
and my
that.
husband, right. It's a bad position to fall asleep in, not good for the neck, but I do that still. And it's because those were the things that were put into action. Kind of like you were saying, like there's you walk the walk, or you talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? And those were the actions that I saw that I hold on to, that I've held on to ever since I was little. Like I can't go to bed without praying at night. And my husband will kind of make fun of me sometimes because I'll be so exhausted, and he'll be like, "Oh, you can skip it." But I'm like, "No, I have to do this." And yet I don't read my scriptures every day. There are plenty of areas where I fail, or where I lack,
Sure.
but that was the example set for me by my mom, and I held on to that. So
that's really cool. I can relate to that. I had a praying mother too. And she really modeled for me like prayer at a young age. And it was powerful. And it's something that has obviously been a big part of my own relationship with God. But it's a big reason why I would say that we are a praying church, because we see tremendous value in doing that together. And I think side of COVID was that like we couldn't get together with people and pray together. And that was something that we really loved doing. We love being able to like physically touch people. And of course we see that in the ministry of Jesus. Jesus like laid hands on people, and he like hugged and loved on people. And there was like a physical connection to that spiritual practice. And so for us, like as, a less high church traditional type, church or community, we still value the reality of prayer as sacrament, as, baptism as sacrament, as, communion as sacrament. But we see those things, like I said, as like signposts pointing us to a more spiritual reality that we then get to kind of like bump into physically when we're with each other.
Oh, I love that so much.
Love it.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like prayer is, I totally believe that we can pray for someone and that energy of love gets passed to them. But I also love what you said, that like doing it physically and being with people, it's a reminder that like when we feel it at night, when I'm praying for someone and a random person will pop in my head, I don't just pray for them. I think, okay, I need to put action behind that. I need to text them tomorrow. This is my sign to reach out to them physically as well. So that is a great reminder. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
You are so good at that, Ash. And she prays for everyone. Do you keep a list? Do you have, or is it just like a physical list, or is it just in your mind?
They say not to let your prayers be repetitive, but they are repetitive. The names just pop in. They go down the line.
I think it shows how loving you are and genuine. And I'll
You're so
mention like
sweet.
random people, and she'll be like, "Oh, I pray for them." I'm like, "What? You hardly even know them." It's always really impressive to me.
Oh, no. That is
So
very sweet of you, though. Thanks,
cool.
So one of the things that we were super impressed with you, Jason, during your service was your music. We were absolutely blown away by your music, and we really weren't completely prepared for it, for like the level that you play and sing.
It was incredible.
And your daughter sings, and and she's such a young, beautiful soul, and then they have a friend that sings that you wouldn't realize the voice comes out of her that would come out of her. And we were just really blown away.
So amazing.
We're really curious when did you start playing music? Have you always played with the church? Have you always been involved in things like that?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for the compliment. I started playing music right around the age of about 14. I had a dad who played drums and a little bit of guitar. My mom used to sing like show tunes around the house as a kid growing up. Kind of grew up with like the big band music of the 20s and 30s. She was really into that, and her mom was. And so I would say music was always a part of kind of the backdrop of our life. It was the soundtrack, always in the background. But I didn't get serious about music until I was in high school. I started to play guitar. My dad bought me this old like nylon string guitar, and I would just like ask people to show me stuff. So I was kind of self-taught in that way, but I would gravitate towards people that played or that I heard actually played. And then I would go to them and say, teach me everything you know. And so I was very passionate about learning guitar. And then that kind of led to the idea of then singing and playing. And when I was about 16, I started kind of helping with the worship team in our youth group at church, which was really cool. And then when I was 18, I got invited to join a kind of a Christian rock band and kind of play all over the world. So I did this global tour right out of high school with a group called Red Rain, which was really fun. Moved to New Zealand, started working in the recording studio. My job was to bring coffee to all the engineers and producers. They would not let me participate, so I was the coffee boy. So I had to make this French press coffee. Because they're from New Zealand, so they're very British with their teas and their coffees. It's a very British inspired culture. Yeah, so I would bring the coffee in, and they'd let me sit in the control room and listen in on the mixes. And then after that, I started playing, and we toured. And of course, you build exposure as you go, and then got into songwriting and producing original material kind of in my 20s and 30s. And then out of that kind of grew into a love for recording music and collaborating with other artists, and the rest is history. But I've been involved with the church musically pretty much from the time I was about 16. And in some form or capacity, I've always helped with worship, whether it be singing or playing guitar. When I was in college, I learned how to play piano. I was actually a music major, and then I transferred to becoming a theology major. But my background is actually in music composition. So I studied with like a composer for a couple of years. And I love that side of things. I love orchestration. I love symphony music, classical music. I love all that too. So yeah, it's all in there.
That's awesome.
That shows you doing musical, and then, your musical background comes through in your form of worship, because I did not know that I was going to a concert when I went to your church. It was awesome. It was so good. And all I thought was, I need to bring my husband here because he loves acoustic. He loves guitar. And I was just like, this is a free concert. There was a moment where Emmy and I looked at each other and we were both crying at the same time. I'm like, the music just touched us. We both feel the spirit through music so strongly, I think, me and you, Emmy. So that was an amazing experience.
And we definitely got into it. More so than my husband and my son.
Yeah.
They loved it, but they're more inward. We're a little more outward, like we're gonna praise,
Yes. Speaking of inward, awesome. I wanted to mention really quick that you mentioned the word inward so much. And I love that because I've been studying New Testament this year, and I noticed that so much of what Jesus says is all about the internal, the inward, like form of worship. I just think that is so beautiful. So I love that you brought that up, because your worship style is just so much based on Christ. And I know that there are people within our religion who wish we had more focus on Christ. So that I really noticed that at your church.
Speaking of music, you kind of coming full circle. You were in Israel for a very specific reason, and that was to film a music video, which is super cool.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that experience, and then maybe kind of just improv here. Tell us a little bit about what you think about these attacks, and kind of from your perspective, going to Israel, and you've been several times, right?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, happy to. So first and foremost, maybe we dovetail into the music video second, but it's really heartbreaking to see like what's happening there right now. Obviously, we know that Israel and the land of Israel has been a contested place for thousands of years. So the conflict in itself is not new, but what is sad is that extremist militant groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and all these kind of warring terrorist cells do not operate from a rational or reasonable ideology. They operate from an extreme, some would say extremely sadistic and even evil ideology that would promote and obviously give them license to do what they're doing right now. There's nothing political or even, remotely acceptable about women and children being raped and mutilated, murdered, taken hostage. I mean, so I just want to say first and foremost, like the fact that that's happening should be people's first concern with regards to Israel. The issue over land and boundaries and rights and all that should be secondary or in my opinion, much further down the list because of what's going on. So that's incredibly heartbreaking to watch. What I will say is that in all the times that I've been to Israel, I've always been impressed with the people there and how grateful they are for what they have in terms of life, in terms of family, in terms of food, art, music, culture. For some of them, their love of God, their love of what that represents. And I've always been impressed with like how connected to the land their love of God is, and how kind of those two things are really like inseparable. Like you can't like necessarily like pull them out of the land and their relationship with God be the same. So I've always kind of taken into mind the fact that Israel has a very deeply rooted faith that isn't just about what they believe, it's also connected to where they live and how they live. And so to have groups that are pressuring them on all sides that really want to destroy them and wipe them out, that are chanting right now in the chambers of their government, death to Israel, death to Israel. This isn't a political war. This, in my opinion, is a battle between good and evil. And so for me, seeing like the people that are going through that right now, my heart, my prayers, as a church, we've been praying for them. We actually just prayed for them yesterday in our service. We took about 10 to 15 minutes just to do that. That's really important to us. And so my love for Israel obviously comes from not just like the love of the Bible and my understanding of that, but it comes from the fact that we have friends and people that we know that work there and that live there and that, that have life there. And so in the times that I've been able to go and be a part of that, it's been really cool. They're there. They're not there right now, thankfully. Everybody's kind of safe and there's kind of lockdown and stuff like that going on. But the times that I've been able to go out and be a part of the work and ministry there has been wonderful. And I've learned a lot. I've gotten to like actually, connect with the people, eat with them, learn some of their language. I'm still not great at Hebrew. I'm still learning, but I've enjoyed spending time there, getting to like obviously walk the sites and understand and unpack the spiritual significance of that. That's been really cool. So our friends that have been there and that have been working there for years now actually invited me to come and to be a part of a music video that they wanted to do for the ministry using a song that I wrote. And so earlier this year, I sat down at the piano and I began to just play, and out kind of popped this song that, in my opinion, is sort of a love song to Israel. It's sort of an ode to the land, and really kind of a calling for people to love Israel and support her. And I wrote it, I recorded it, produced it with a friend, and then I sent it to my buddy and I said, hey, I think this song is for you guys. It's not for me. So whatever I can do to kind of like serve and support what you're doing there, I just want this to be a gift. And so he loved it. Wow. The ministry loved it. And then they said, why don't we do a music video and have you come over and actually be in it? I was like, I don't need to be in it. They're like, no, we want you in it. It's your song. You wrote it. We think you should be in it. So that's kind of how that all evolved. And we haven't released it yet. We're actually waiting for the right moment to do that. I think that the ministry still got some timelines and things they're working through on how they're going to do that. Obviously, with everything that's happened in the last few days, that's kind of more priority right now. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, it was a kind of an amazing experience to be able to walk the walls of the old city. And I really enjoyed doing that. Really thankful for that experience.
Yeah, just kind of in time. And it sounds like it's really deeply personal to you and to so many people, I'm sure. It's just absolutely devastating. But I'm glad that you were able to do that. And I didn't know all of that background. That's really super interesting.
Yeah. I can't imagine your song coming at a more perfect time for Israel. That sounds so completely inspired. That is really beautiful, Jason.
Yeah, I'm excited for you all to hear it. I'll let you know when it's on its way.
Yes. As soon as you do, we'll put it on our social media.
Cool. Yes, we'll link it. We'll link it in the bio. We'll link it somewhere. Because we would love to hear it and see it as well. I wanted to share something really quick because what you said reminded me of something. I just wanted to emphasize that that this war that's going on, that not everyone is involved or would condone that in Israel. I had a friend who traveled to Israel, and the first thing they did was ask their taxi driver whether they were Palestinian or what's the term? Israeli. Yeah. Yes. And I was so impressed that the taxi driver said it doesn't matter. And he said, we are one here. We are all one. And so it does just go to show that, these horrible things happen, but there's still love there. And there's still so many incredible people there. And, good conquers evil. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. It does.
Yeah. Yes. Before we move on to our next segment, we just wanted to let everyone know where they can connect with you and your congregation further. Yes. I'm sure that many of our listeners would love to even attend a service of yours. So
we would be so honored and overjoyed to have them. So our church website is obviously the best and easiest place to find out information about our church. It's courageouschurch.com. And we gather on Sundays at 10 a.m. in Salt Lake City, right off Foothill Drive and I-80. So if you're coming down the canyon from Park City, it's the very first right out of the canyon onto Foothill. And then we're about 2 stoplights from the freeway, which is really cool. So we meet currently inside of a church called Wasatch Hills. It's actually owned by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They actually let us rent it out on Sundays. So we are there at that same address, 2139 Foothill. And we also are doing something kind of cool in the month of November. You mentioned music, and we've talked a little bit about worship and some of what I do with that. We're actually doing a live worship event with some other churches here in the Valley on November 19th, which is a Sunday night at 5:30 at the Mid-Valley Performing Arts Center in Taylorsville. So we're going to be renting that out on Sunday night at 5:30. 4 or 5 of our bands are all coming together to create kind of a single band, and we're going to do some music and some songs, and it's kind of a night of thanks. We did it last year. It was awesome, really well attended. A lot of people come out for that, but it's open to everybody. So if you go to our website, I think within the next week or two, we'll have some more information about all that as well.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. And your website is amazing.
Count
I
me
was
in.
so impressed with it. And you can listen to Pastor Jason right there on the website. I felt like it was like a TED Talk, and I just listened as I was doing my dishes. It was extremely inspiring and really
Thanks
a
so much.
well thought out website, and all the information is there as well. This last segment, we have 2 questions that we will be asking all of our guests. And cool. I love this segment. This is my very favorite part. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited. And then we'll have a kind of a fun question at the end to just kind of help people to learn a little bit more about you on a different type of level.
Cool.
So Jason, is there any special piece of wisdom or maybe a quote that has stuck out to you or helped you in your life? We would love for you to leave it with us.
Very cool. Well, as you can probably tell, I'm very passionate about worship, passionate about music. But there was this quote that I came across when I was in college many moons ago. And it's actually by the poet Ralph Waldo Emerson. Maybe some of you or your listeners are familiar with his work. Mm-hmm. But he says this, and it's kind of a lengthy quote, so I'm going to read it so I don't screw it up, okay?
Awesome.
So
Love it.
He says, a person will worship something, have no doubt about that. We may think that our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our heart, but it will out. That which dominates our imaginations and our thoughts will determine our lives and our character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship, for what we are worshiping, we are becoming. And that's Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I think the idea that I find in that quote to be so inspiring is that you become essentially what you behold. Sometimes I'll say it this way to our young people, like our youth and our young people. I'll say, you become like the people you hang out with. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And
Amen.
So the idea is that the idea is kind of like that worship is not just about like what you confess, what you say. Worship is also about like what you behold, like what you put in front of yourself, like what you're staring at, what you're gazing into. And that your future is really shaped by your thoughts, by your worship, by the things that your life is paying tribute to, as Ralph Waldo Emerson would say in that quote. So for me, that's really governed a lot of the choices that I've made. It governs the music I listen to. It governs the movies I watch. It governs the people I hang out with. It governs the decisions my wife and I make about our future, the relationships we build with other people. Because worship is more than just song. It's all encompassing of what we behold. And so that's something I think might help some of you out there as you think about worship, maybe in a way that's a little bigger than just the songs you sing on Sunday.
Oh my gosh, dude, you freaking killed it. That was amazing. I'm just feeling that. I am like, oh my gosh, that encompasses so much of what I believe. Like, that's it. Mic drop. That was amazing. That is so powerful.
That's
because I really do think
church.
That's church, people. This is it. Because that is exactly how I feel. And I heard a quote somewhere that said that was like, you become the 5 people you surround yourself with the most, that you become like those 5 people. And that just, it's so true. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that.
We've been talking about that with some of our friends. We've been talking, we all have teenagers, and well, Ashlie doesn't, but a few of us have teenagers, and we've been talking about how important friends are, and, those close circles and the things that we do every day make such a big difference in the, the routines we get in and all of those things. So I think it's very, impact. I think that would be very impactful for a lot of people.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that.
And church goes beyond 4 walls.
To.
Beyond the walls of church.
Yeah.
Church is all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So this next question, I want to kind of preface it a little bit. I within the LDS Church, many of us receive callings to perform in different areas of the church. And I right now I teach a class called Gospel Doctrine or Sunday School class. Every other week, I teach the adults in our church, and the children go to primary or nursery and to different areas. And then I teach this group of adults, which is quite intimidating. A friend asked me to speak at a spiritual retreat, and so I thought, well, I'll just share what I'm going to share in my next lesson. Yeah. And so I asked all of the people that were close to me this same question, and the results that I had were absolutely insane. I felt like I grew so much closer to them, and on such a deep personal level. And these people that I asked this question to, I was already very close to them, but it was we kind of grew closer in a more intimate spiritual way than I ever had before. And they were people that some people were part of the church, some people were not part of the church. One of them was my brother and his husband, and one of them was my cousin and her wife, and one of them was my brother that just recently left our church. And there were many people that I asked this exact same question to, and the results were insane, because the thing that I thought I would gain from this was, everyone has kind of the same experience or whatever. But actually what I gained from it was I could never pick out who it was that answered any of these questions. We all are loving. We all love a higher power. We all are just in this together and trying to figure out life. And the question was, what is your relationship to a higher power? Or what is your belief in a higher power? So I would pose that question to you as well.
I can see why you got a lot of different answers. It's a big question, right?
It is, yeah.
It's the question that I think all of us are wrestling with in a very practical way. Obviously every day in our conversations with people, our friends, our families, our loved ones. But it's also a question that I think is important to define and really, have an answer to, because out of that question come a lot of other questions as to like why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing, and like what the meaning and purpose of life is all about. And so we actually, as a church, do something that we call Alpha, and Alpha is almost maybe similar to what you're doing on Sunday mornings, but it's actually a series of looking at life's big questions with people in a way that's kind of safe and a great place to kind of explore what people think, and looking at kind of different answers and exploring the Christian faith, looking at obviously the Bible and like what the Bible says about God and who God is. But it starts with like that big question that you just asked me, like, what do you think about God? What do you think about a higher power? What do you think about like who he is and what he's all about? And one of the things that I think that I love about Alpha, and that I really believe, is that it allows people to start with kind of a 30,000 foot perspective of who God is before you drill down into the like boots on the ground reality of like what the scriptures say about God. And it allows people to like come with their thoughts and ideas of like who God is. And then you can explore together in a way that's, I think, really kind and generous, but also that's clear, because I do think that there are some clear answers that have been provided for us to find answers to that question. So all of that to say, and to answer your question, my personal belief in God would be what I think the Orthodox Christian Church has always believed, that God is one in three persons. Sometimes that's referred to as the Trinity, that he would express himself as one in three persons, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Nothing, new or terribly controversial about that. However, I will say this, which is very interesting. When I first moved to Salt Lake City, I bought into a study that was done by a research group called the George Barna Research Group. I think I paid $100, and they do a city by city report about what people believe. And about 88% of people in Salt Lake City that were polled in 2017 all said they believed in God. So 88% is a really high percentage, in my opinion.
Yes.
But the follow-up question was, okay, what about Jesus? Is Jesus the Son of God? And then it went down to about 44% of people said yes to that question.
Okay.
And then the next question was, did he live a sinless life? And then it dropped down to like 22 to 30% of people said yes to that question. And then was he born of a virgin? It went down to 10%. So what that showed me, and I'm really glad that I did that study, by the way. I think it's really important to do that, to actually like
fascinating,
figure out what people believe.
Yes.
What it showed me was that a lot of people like have a belief in God. They have this kind of 30,000 foot view of maybe God being real. And for me, like where I guess you could say where the rubber really meets the road is, if God exists, what's he like? And if Jesus is the Son of God, that changes everything. Because Jesus made some really interesting claims, some really kind of exclusive, even blasphemous claims about his sonship and him and the Father being one, that ultimately got him murdered and crucified. But essentially, Jesus, as a faithful Jewish rabbi and man, believed that God was one. In fact, it was a part of the Jewish tradition to pray this prayer called the Shema each and every day. And the first words of the Shema are this: it's "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." So there's always been this belief that God is one. Jesus pushed the envelope by saying things like he and the Father are one. So Jesus claimed oneness with God the Father, essentially claiming, himself to be God. And then he breathes on the disciples and says, receive the Holy Spirit. And why did he do this? I believe the reason he does this is because he wants them to be one with God as well. And so all throughout like the scriptures, there's this kind of beautiful picture and reality of God revealing himself to us so that he can be one with us and so that we can be one with him. This idea of oneness is not like a new doctrine. It's something that has been taught from the beginning of really like Jewish history and belief all the way through like the early church. And so the idea that God is one in three is a mystery in that, like, I can't tell you how he's one in three, but I can tell you that he is one in three based on the fact that he's revealed himself to be that way. And Jesus affirms it. The Holy Spirit affirms it. And then, of course, his disciples, all of his followers, everybody that kind of comes after him affirms it. And then if you think about like how God is one in our lives, I mean, you think about like oneness within your marriage. You think about the idea of how important it is to have unity within your relationships and how that gets expressed in, the lives of other people that you love. And so for me, that's really kind of how I understand and see God. And then obviously, like how that gets kind of worked out through scripture and the reality of that for me is very much alive and very much a big part of my life. It's been probably the most helpful thing for me to understanding who God is and how he's revealed himself through that reality.
Wow. I love that idea of oneness, and I feel like I have felt that myself, like God just kind of being part of my life and feeling really connected at different times of my life and not as connected in others. And I feel that that's actually me moving and not him moving. And, he's stationary and I'm maybe going a different direction at times. But we also, Ashlie and I, just today, I think the last couple of days, we've been talking about generations and generations beyond us. And the fact that maybe after you share that, Ashlie, it was your thought and your idea.
I just, I was thinking about, generations and how our genes get passed down through the generations. And I see things in my kids that don't look like me or Garrett, but maybe look like one of my uncles or aunts, And so I was just thinking that spiritually, like us being one, like, well, we all come from God. And so we are all one just by default, just by coming from him maybe, or coming from them, however you interpret God, however you interpret the divine. But that sense of oneness, I love that word. That word is just so perfect. That sense of oneness and togetherness is so beautiful. I was thinking of the quote from Les Mis because we are obsessed with Les Mis in our family. But the quote that is
Hence
to
our
love another
tattoos.
person. Yeah, we have tattoos of Les Mis, so that's how much we love it.
Matching tattoos.
But the quote that is to love another person is to see the face of God. And that just sums up how I feel of God and oneness and love, that God really is love and togetherness and oneness. So thank you for sharing that, Jason. That was very inspiring.
What's really cool too, like, happy to, the interesting thing about that prayer I mentioned, the Shema, that it's like one of the most famous Jewish prayers. It comes from the book of Deuteronomy. And like the idea of God being one is then followed by the idea that you should love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Well, like even within that command is this idea of like being whole, of being one, of being in unity with him. And what I love about unity is not really about uniformity. It's more about alignment. It's more about like being in harmony. That's what I actually taught on a couple weeks ago. Like the idea that we could be together in harmony is something that God blesses. It's something that he anoints, something that he breathes on. And that's what he's actually created us for. The problem is we become all too divided over, a lot of things, including what we wear, including what, our political ideas, our affiliations, our tastes, like you name it. And actually the goal for our lives is oneness. Like the goal for my marriage is oneness. The goal for my church is for people to come together in oneness. And once again, not uniformity, but unity. This idea that we're together in one place, in one accord. We've got one heart, one mindset. And like that in and of itself is what God wants for us. And that is how love gets expressed in our lives.
Oh,
oneness.
That is so beautiful.
Is my new word. I'm gonna
that is it. Yes.
put it on my mirror.
Oh, that's it. That's church.
Really, really
I
love
tell people,
that.
I need a buzzer.
I'm learning the language of oneness. I'm like an infant in the language of oneness. I'm trying to learn how to do this thing because everything in me anatomically sometimes wants to revolt and rebel. And I think like bringing that into alignment and submitting that to God is an everyday practice. Surrender is every day. So
yeah, this is your next sermon. Done.
Yeah, it's done. It's already recorded.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all
send me the notes,
kind of,
please.
Yeah.
Yes. Just play this at your next sermon. Yeah, I was gonna say, like you saying that, like that you need those the reminder to do better. I think that we all need that. My husband and I do that for each other, where he'll say something that's not the nicest. I'll be like, well, listen, babe, and then I'll say something. He's like, we keep each other in check, And I think you don't give yourself enough credit, because I have definitely been spiritually fed today, and this has just been incredible. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing so many beautiful thoughts. It's just been so inspiring. I get the fun question now, although all of these have been really fun. They've been really fun, but I get the fun question that really doesn't have to do much, or maybe it does, with spirituality. But what is your number one bucket list item? Or if you have a few, we'd love to hear all of them.
That you still have left to do.
I know. That is a great question. So, number one bucket list item would be sailing the Amalfi Coast with my wife, Candice.
Oh, I
that sounds
love
incredible.
That.
That's my new one too. With your wife, Candice. That sounds amazing. Oh my gosh.
We were supposed to go to the Amalfi Coast last year, and because of the war on Ukraine, we decided it was a little too close for comfort. So we ended up in Ireland and Amsterdam and England, but
which was awesome. But we were bummed.
That. I love that dream.
Yeah, that is a great one. That is a great one to end on.
We love Italy. I proposed to my wife in Florence, in Italy.
Oh, shut up.
So we have kind of a love affair with Southern Italy, and that's always been on our list of things we'd love to do one day. But you want to do it right, too. You can't just take like a little like dinghy.
Right.
You got to take like a yacht. You got to do this thing right. So that's what we're hoping for.
Yes.
Oh man,
we love
take
travel.
us with you.
we were hoping this answer would be something to do with travel. because we can get on board with that.
Yes.
Yeah, we're a big travel
Yes.
family.
That's so cool.
That's
Yes,
amazing.
We are.
That is
We love it.
incredible.
Is there anything you want to add before we finish?
No, and I don't think there's anything I would like to add, but I guess maybe the question that I have, and feel free to edit this or not, but what kind of inspired you two to want to do this podcast, and what's the genesis of you guys coming together to do this?
Oh, I love this question.
Oh, I'm not prepared. You go, Emmy.
Honestly, yeah, I can answer this right now. Honestly, we the question that I asked you about, the higher power question, that really prompted it for me. I loved interviewing people and really getting to know them on a spiritual level. And so that kind of initiated a fire in me of wanting to do something with that. I just didn't know what.
Yeah.
So we went through a lot of different versions actually. And then we kind of settled on a version of this. And then Ashlie and I went to San Diego, and there was a church there, and it was called a mission, and it was
Spanish
this
mission,
absolutely Spanish mission. Yeah, it was this absolutely beautiful church, and our friends that we were with didn't want to go on the tour, but we were all gung-ho. So we went on this tour, and at the end of it, we went inside one of the chapels. There were a couple, and we both kind of went our separate ways. We were both kind of feeling the Spirit on our own, and just kind of looking at things individually. And then we came together at the Holy Water, and we both kind of did our own thing at the Holy Water. And then we both looked at each other, and we just had this absolutely amazing moment at the exact same time. And we both just started crying, and we were like, this is what we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it really just solidified it for us.
That's
that this is right. And we both always really loved religion and learning about different religions. And within our church, it's kind of almost been a little bit taboo. And I remember, sorry, just to expand on it a little bit, I remember once going to, when I was 18, after my senior year of high school, I went on my senior trip with some friends, and we went to New York and Florida. And while we were in New York, we were walking down the streets of Manhattan, and we walked down this street that had a church, just like this little doorway. It was in the midst of all these buildings and businesses, and there were people handing out pamphlets, and one of the pamphlets was from the church, and one of them was just the hymns. And I was like, oh, this is a church, and they're having a service right now. I want to go in so bad. And my friends were like, no, Emily, we shouldn't do that. That's kind of taboo. And we didn't go in, and I was kind of sad the rest of that day, thinking I really wanted to partake of that and just learn from something different, and different traditions and different ways of worshiping. And I didn't get that. And I think even since I've been married, I've really, my husband and I both have been really intrigued by it. And I know Ashlie has had her own experiences as well. So it's kind of been a burning passion inside me since a really young age, actually, even before my senior year. So
that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Do you want to add
love
anything
that so much, Em,
to that?
Yeah, I think it was, I think it took me about 0.2 seconds to say yes to this offer to do a podcast with you. I was like, yes, because it's just so us, and speaking on, or talking about oneness, we did have that moment. We had already talked about the podcast, which I think made us more excited to go into that Spanish mission in San Diego. But it really was we both had it confirmed in us that it's what we should do at the same time. And we both cried, and it was very powerful and kind of strange that we both went opposite directions in the church. I headed to the confessional, which I'm not going to say anything about that.
I have always wanted to go in a confessional and
and Emmy went to the front.
That's one of my bucket list items.
Yeah, there was nobody there, but but if there was, I might have gone inside. Who knows? But Emmy went to the front of the church, which also might be telling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Jason?
Oh, sorry. No, there's a little bit of a delay. So we have former Catholics that sometimes will show up, and they'll come to me, and they're like, I have a confession. And I'm like, I'm not that kind of priest, you know, like they're like, what do you mean? Like, I'm like, that's not how we do it around here. You just go right to God with it. But
You're like,
I mean,
just take it to
I'm
God.
happy to like lay hands and pray. Yeah. You got it.
I love it. I love that so much.
Made me think of that. So
I love it. No, thank you for sharing. That's exactly how I feel too. Like my husband and I met when we were 17, and he would talk about going to the bishop for different things. And I'm like, dude, I just took that straight to God. I don't need no middleman. So yeah, everybody has their own style, I guess, on doing confessions. But yeah, Emmy went to the front of the chapel. I went to the back, which I don't know what that says. But when we came together in the middle at the holy water, and it was like, it just was such a beautiful moment. We just like, we're very similar in a lot of ways, her and I, and we have a lot of common interests. And so, and this is one of them, which is just perfect, because I think with these kinds of things, you have to be passionate. And I'm sure you feel that way about being a pastor.
Yes.
You know, I'm sure that if you didn't have that passion, you wouldn't be able to like connect with people as much and embrace people. And so, yeah, I think it was an easy yes for me. And I have an account. I've had an account on Instagram for a few years now, and it's a spiritual based account, but it is very non-traditional, kind of, you know, on the front of, you know, being non-traditional. You know, the LDS Church is a pretty orthodox church, and my account kind of explores the questions and the mysteries, and, you know, like the things that aren't talked about very often. And the connections I've made on my account, I could just cry. Like, it's just been such a wonderful, like, coming together of people, especially people who might feel like misfits, or maybe like a sense of like not belonging. And so to like bond with these people in this little community online has been incredible. And so I think, like, when Emmy talked about a fire being lit in her from, you know, interviewing people, it's a similar thing for me, that fire has been lit and it's not being put out. So if anything, we want to grow that fire and that passion. And, you know, we've both been, our grandma was LDS and our grandpa was Catholic, and they were the perfect example of a mixed faith marriage. And so I think we've always had that love and curiosity for other religions. So we're super excited for this podcast. And we are just so grateful that it was you to be our first one, because, like, you are awesome.
So honored. Thank you.
You've been amazing. And just coming to your church was like, it really was such a beautiful experience. From someone who feels the Spirit so much from music, it was like, it was just I was spiritually fed. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for joining us on That's Church. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at That's Church Podcast for more updates, insights, and a glimpse into the diverse spiritual tapestry of Utah.
Let's keep the conversation going, because we believe that gaining knowledge of other religions does not diminish our own faith, but can instead enrich our spirituality.
Jason's my name. Pastoring is what I do.
All right.
Looking good, smelling good.
We're good. We all sound good. We all smell good.
I love it.
Dude, we crushed it.
We said beautiful so many times, but I think it was,
That's true.
I expected some wows. I expected, but beautiful. But it really doesn't encompass this interview. It was all beautiful, and I don't take it back. I'm not taking them out.
If so,
you know what that is, Emilie? That's beautiful.
That is beautiful.